The first warning sign was not when the CEO's son cut my team's budget in half. It was the way he smiled like system stability was a joke for old people. He told the room that we do not need redundancy. We need speed. I looked at the slide showing a 50% cut to infrastructure and a 200% increase for marketing. I did not argue. I just took notes because I knew exactly what happens when you starve a system. My name is Zara Cruz, and I have spent the last 15 years of my life cleaning up messes that other people make. I am the Director of Platform Reliability and Risk at Northline Dynamics. A title that sounds impressive on LinkedIn, but in practice means I am the designated buzzkill at every party. I am the one who asks if the servers can handle the load. I am the one who asks what happens if the data center in Virginia floods. I am the one who points out that hope is not a strategy. Today, I sat in the fourth row of the main auditorium at our headquarters in Raleigh and watched the future of this company dismantle my career with a laser pointer. The air conditioning in the room was set to a temperature that felt designed to keep us awake rather than comfortable. 500 employees sat in rows of gray fabric chairs, their faces illuminated by the glow of the massive screen on stage. We were all looking at Camden Voss. He was technically the vice president of product strategy, but everyone knew his real title was the son of the CEO. Camden was 32 years old, wore sneakers that cost more than my mortgage payment, and had the kind of teeth that were so white they looked aggressive. He was pacing the stage like he was delivering a TED Talk to an audience of millions. He spoke about synergy. He spoke about velocity. He used the word disruption 3 times in the first 2 minutes. I sat with my hands folded in my lap and watched the performance. It was a good show. He had charisma. I will give him that. He had the energy of a golden retriever that had just been given an espresso shot. Then he clicked the remote in his hand, and the slide changed. The screen displayed a massive bar graph titled Strategic Resource Reallocation. The bar representing marketing and user acquisition shot up like a skyscraper, green and vibrant. It showed a 200% increase. The crowd murmured with excitement. Everyone likes to hear that we are spending money to grow. Then Camden pointed the laser at the red bar next to it. It was my department. The bar had been chopped in half. We are entering a new era with PulseCart, Camden said, his voice booming through the speakers. To move fast, we need to shed the dead weight. We have been spending too much money on what I call fear-based infrastructure. We are spending millions on redundancies for scenarios that never happen. We are paying for premium support tiers we do not use. We are overinsured and underambitious. He looked out at the crowd, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. We are going to streamline, he said. We are cutting the platform reliability and QA budget by 50%. We are reallocating those funds to aggressive user acquisition. We do not need a safety net if we never fall. A few heads turned to look at me. I kept my face completely neutral. Inside, my mind was racing through the implications. A 50% cut meant I would lose half my team. It meant canceling our enterprise support contracts with our cloud providers. It meant reducing our data retention periods. It meant that if something broke, we would be fixing it with duct tape and prayers instead of proper engineering. I raised my hand. The room went quiet. You do not interrupt the prince when he is holding court. But I had a fiduciary duty to this company, even if the company did not seem to care. Camden paused and smiled. It was a smile that did not reach his eyes. Yes. Sarah. Do you have a question? My name is Zara. He knew that. I had corrected him on 3 separate occasions over the last year. He did it on purpose. It was a small power play, a way to remind me that I was barely a blip on his radar. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but my voice was steady. I looked directly at him. Camden, if you cut the reliability budget by 50%, we will not be able to maintain our service-level agreements. We will lose our 24-hour on-call coverage. If PulseCart scales as fast as you predict, the infrastructure will not hold without that support. What is the plan for when the system goes down? Camden chuckled into the microphone. The sound echoed off the walls. There is the classic attitude, he said, shaking his head theatrically. Everyone, look at this. This is exactly what I'm talking about. We have people here who are addicted to spreadsheets and risk registers. They are so afraid of crashing that they never take their foot off the brake. He walked to the edge of the stage and looked down at me. Sarah, the plan is that the system will not go down because we are building it better. We are not planning for failure. We are planning for success. We do not need pessimistic legacy thinking. We need speed. He turned back to the audience, dismissing me completely. PulseCard is about seamlessness. It is about instant gratification. We are launching in 2 months, and we are going to break every record in the industry. The room erupted in applause. I looked around. I saw engineers who knew better clapping their hands. I saw project managers who knew the timeline was impossible nodding their heads. I saw the director of finance looking at his phone to avoid eye contact with me. No one was going to step in front of the train. They all wanted to keep their jobs. They all wanted to believe the fantasy. I sat down slowly. The rest of the meeting was a blur of buzzwords and high fives. Camden announced the launch date for PulseCard. He showed a projection of user growth that looked like a hockey stick. He promised stock options. He promised bonuses. He promised glory. When the meeting ended, the room cleared out fast. People gave me a wide berth as they shuffled toward the exits. It was as if I had a contagious disease. I was the person who had tried to ruin the vibe. I was the relic from the old days who did not understand the new vision. I walked back to my desk in the corner of the 4th floor. The office was an open-plan nightmare of glass and white laminate, designed to foster collaboration but mostly just fostering noise. I sat down and stared at my dual monitors. My inbox was already filling up with meeting cancellations. The weekly reliability review was canceled. The disaster recovery drill was canceled. Camden was moving fast. Just like he said. I could have resigned right then. I could have typed up a letter and walked out the door. But I have a mortgage. I have 2 kids in college. And honestly, I have too much pride to let a man in expensive sneakers push me out of a company I helped build. I did not open my email. Instead, I opened a folder on my local drive labeled Administrative Archives. This was the folder where I kept the documents that no one else wanted to read. The boring stuff. The contracts. The compliance forms. The vendor agreements that were hundreds of pages long and written in dense legal language. I opened the master service agreement for GatePay, our third-party payment processor. Camden thought reliability was just about servers staying on. He thought it was about code. But reliability is also about limits. It is about the legal and technical boundaries that are written in ink, not in Python. I scrolled through the PDF. I knew what I was looking for, but I needed to see it with my own eyes to be sure. I went past the fee structures. I went past the liability waivers. I stopped at Section 14, Paragraph 3. It was a clause regarding fraud protection and high-velocity scaling. GatePay had a hard limit on transaction processing for accounts that had not undergone a stress integrity review. It was a safety mechanism designed to prevent money laundering and bot attacks. If an account exceeded a certain volume of concurrent transactions without that review, GatePay would automatically flag the traffic as malicious. It would freeze the payment gateway to protect the bank. It was not a setting we could change in our dashboard. It was a hard switch on their end. I looked at the number defined in the contract, 3.4 million active monthly users. I looked at the sticky note on my monitor where I had written down Camden's projection numbers from the slide deck. He was buying billboard space in Times Square. He was paying influencers on every major social platform. He was targeting 5 million users in the first week. He had cut the budget for the team that would normally check these contracts. He had cut the budget for the load testing that would have revealed this limit. He had silenced the only person in the room who would have thought to look for it. I leaned back in my chair. The hum of the office seemed to fade away. Camden Voss wanted to move fast. He wanted to break things. He was going to get exactly what he wanted. He was going to hit 3.4 million users, and he was going to do it right when the spotlight was brightest. I closed the document and locked my screen. I did not send a warning email. I did not run to the legal department. I had asked about risk in the meeting, and I had been told that I was the problem. 3.4 million users. That is the exact threshold they do not know about. and I decided right then that I was not going to tell them. I do not have a robust social media presence. My LinkedIn profile has not been updated in 4 years, and I do not post inspirational quotes about leadership or synergy. I am invisible to the outside world, and that is exactly how I like it. In the world of platform reliability, fame is usually a bad thing. If people know your name, it is usually because something catastrophic has happened, and you are the one standing in the smoking crater holding the fire extinguisher. However, the people who actually keep this company alive know exactly who I am. 3 years ago, we had a payment gateway desynchronization event on Black Friday. It was a nightmare scenario where thousands of customers were being charged double, and thousands more were not being charged at all. The CTO was hyperventilating in the conference room. I was the one who isolated the corrupt transaction logs. I was the one who wrote the script to reverse the erroneous charges without triggering fraud alerts at the banks. I stayed in the office for 42 hours straight. I did not do it for glory. I did it because I take my job seriously. My job is not just keeping the servers running. My job is defining the rules of engagement. I built the service-level agreements that promise our enterprise clients 99.9% uptime. I established the change freeze windows that prevent cowboy developers from pushing untested code into production on a Friday afternoon. I created the audit trails that ensure we can pass a federal compliance review without being fined into bankruptcy. Camden Voss does not understand this. To him, technology is magic. He thinks you press a button, and the app works. He thinks uptime is a technical metric, a simple green light on a dashboard. He is wrong. Uptime is not just technology. Uptime is money. Uptime is the difference between a profitable quarter and a class action lawsuit. Uptime is power. The real backbone of Northline Dynamics is not the sleek interface of our app or the clever marketing copy. It is the boring, dense, impenetrable stack of contracts we have signed with our vendors. It is the cloud service provider agreement that dictates how much bandwidth we can consume before they throttle us. It is the cyber insurance policy that covers us in the event of a data breach. But only if we can prove we followed specific security protocols. It is the merchant agreement with our payment processor that outlines exactly what constitutes suspicious activity. These documents are the physics of our corporate universe. You cannot violate them just because you have a vision. If you break the laws of physics, you crash. If you break the clauses of these contracts, the vendors pull the plug, and no amount of positive thinking will turn the lights back on. The 50% budget cut that Camden announced was not just an insult, it was a tactical dismantling of our defenses. I went back to my desk after the all-hands meeting and looked at the numbers. It was a brutal equation. I had half the money I needed to do the job properly. I had to make a choice. It was the kind of choice that keeps you awake at 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling. I could keep the people, or I could keep the tools. If I fired half my team, the remaining engineers would burn out within a month. They would be waking up every night to handle incidents, and eventually, they would quit. If I cut the tools, we would be flying blind, but at least we would have humans to react when we inevitably hit a wall. I chose the people. I canceled our subscription to the premium monitoring dashboard that gave us real-time predictive analytics. I downgraded our log retention storage from 1 year to 30 days, praying that we would not need to investigate an incident older than a month. I renegotiated our cloud support tier from enterprise to business, which meant that if the site went down, Amazon was not obligated to call us back within 15 minutes anymore. They could take 4 hours. It felt like stripping the armor off a tank before sending it into battle, but I thought I had saved the core of the team. I was wrong. 2 days later, I received an email from Camden's operations manager. They had reviewed the payroll allocation for my department. They noticed that we spent a significant amount of money on on-call rotation pay. This is the extra money we pay engineers to keep their phones on and stay sober during nights and weekends, ready to jump online if the server crashes. The email was short and cheerful. It said that in the spirit of the new lean methodology, we were eliminating paid on-call rotations. It suggested that reliability should be a culture, not a line item, and that engineers should take ownership of their code without needing extra financial incentives. I stared at the screen. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from rage. You cannot ask someone to work a full day and then stay on high alert all night for free. That is not culture. That is exploitation. I knew what would happen. My team would stop answering the phone at night. Why would they pick up if the site crashed at 2 in the morning? It would stay crashed until 9 in the morning. I was drafting a resignation letter in my head when my instant messenger pinged. It was Ava Klein. Ava works in internal audit. In most tech companies, developers hate internal audit. They see them as the police, the people who slow everything down with forms and checklists. But I have always liked Ava. She is quiet, wears oversized cardigans, and has eyes that miss absolutely nothing. She is the only person in the building who reads the contracts as carefully as I do. Her message was simple. Zara, I saw the budget update. With the elimination of the on-call stipend and the reduction in third-party support, our risk profile has shifted significantly. Has the executive team signed a formal risk acceptance statement for the potential breach of our client service level agreements? I leaned back in my chair. It was the perfect question. It was the question that no one else had the courage to ask. In the corporate world, you can do dangerous things, but you have to admit you are doing them. If you want to drive a car with no brakes, you have to sign a paper saying you know there are no brakes. That way, when you crash, the shareholders know who to blame. I realized I had one move left. I could not stop Camden from cutting the budget, but I could force him to own the consequences. I opened a blank document. I did not write an emotional plea. I did not complain. I wrote a memo. It was 2 pages long. I used simple, plain English. I avoided acronyms. I explained that by cutting the monitoring tools and the on-call pay, we were removing the mechanism for detecting and fixing outages outside of business hours. I wrote, under the new budget structure, the estimated time to recover from a critical system failure will increase from 20 minutes to approximately 8 hours. This exceeds the maximum downtime permitted in our contracts with our 3 largest enterprise clients. This exposes Northline Dynamics to breach of contract penalties estimated at $200,000 per hour of downtime. I concluded the memo with a request. I asked the executive team to sign a risk acceptance form. Acknowledging that they understood these risks and were choosing to proceed anyway, it was a standard procedure. It was something we had done dozens of times for minor issues. I sent the memo to Camden Voss. I copied the Chief Financial Officer, Marissa Dale, and the General Counsel, Anton Briggs. I hit send and waited. I expected a meeting. I expected a phone call. I expected them to argue about the numbers. I did not expect what happened next. 45 minutes later, my inbox chimed. It was an email from Camden, but it was not just to me. He had forwarded my memo to the entire company. Every engineer, every product manager, every marketing intern received it. Camden had added a message at the top, written in bold blue text. Team, please see the attached document. This is exactly the kind of legacy thinking that holds us back. We are building a rocket ship, and we have people worrying about what happens if we get a flat tire. We do not plan for failure at Northline. We plan for victory. I want everyone to focus on shipping Pulse Drop, not writing essays about why we cannot do it. Stop fear-mongering. Let's get to work. I sat frozen. He had just publicly humiliated me. He had framed my professional due diligence as cowardice. He had labeled my attempt to protect the company as an act of sabotage. I could hear laughter from the engineering bullpen down the hall. I saw the Slack emojis popping up in the general channel rocket ships, flexed biceps, and laughing faces. They were laughing at the director of risk. They thought I was a dinosaur. My face felt hot. I looked at the memo attached to his email. He had not addressed a single point I raised. He had not signed the waiver. He had just used me as a prop to boost his own image as a fearless visionary. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Okay, Camden, you want to play it that way? You refuse to sign the risk acceptance. You refuse to acknowledge the warnings. And you just broadcasted your negligence to the entire company. He thought he had won. He thought he had crushed me. But he had just given me the most valuable thing in the world. He had given me evidence. I did not reply to the email. I did not storm into his office. I simply created a new folder on my hard drive, labeled it Pulse Drop Liability, and dragged his email inside. If he wanted to drive the car off the cliff, I would not stand in the middle of the road waving my arms anymore. I would stand on the sidewalk and watch, and I would make sure I had a high-definition camera rolling when it happened. The invasion began on a Tuesday morning. I arrived at the office to find that the coffee machine had been upgraded to a barista-grade espresso maker, and the hallways were swarming with men in slim-fit blazers who looked like they had just walked out of a catalog for expensive watches. These were the consultants. Camden Voss had hired a boutique firm called Velocity Partners to help us streamline our culture. I knew exactly what that meant. In the corporate dictionary, streamlining culture is usually a polite synonym for firing the people who ask difficult questions. They wasted no time redecorating. By lunch, the walls were covered in sleek, minimalist posters printed in aggressive red and black typography. They featured slogans that sounded profound until you actually thought about them for more than 2 seconds. Move fast. Don't apologize. Friction is failure. The user is the only boss. I stood in front of the Move Fast. Don't apologize poster near the elevator. It was ironic. In my line of work, if you move too fast, you usually end up apologizing to the entire customer base, 3 federal regulators, and a judge. My calendar, which used to be packed with architectural review meetings and deployment planning sessions, was suddenly wide open. I had been silently removed from the invite lists, the weekly strategy sync. I was off it. The Pulse Drop launch roadmap meeting, I was replaced by a junior project manager who nodded at everything Camden said. However, while they did not want my voice, they still needed my hands. At 2 p.m, the staging environment for the new shopping cart integration crashed. It was a catastrophic failure that took down the internal testing servers. Suddenly, my desk phone rang. It was one of the Velocity consultants, a man named Tyler, who had introduced himself to me by asking what my superpower was. "Hey, Zara," he said, his voice tight. "We have a bit of a blocker here. The card isn't loading. Can you work your magic?" I did not point out that if I had been in the planning meeting, I would have told them that the database query they were running was too heavy for the existing architecture. I did not ask for an apology. I just fixed it. I went into the back end, optimized the query, restarted the services, and brought the system back online. "Thanks, Zara," Tyler said. "You are a lifesaver." Then he hung up and went back to a meeting I was not allowed to attend. I was the janitor. They did not want me at the party, but they certainly called me when the toilet backed up. The next blow came on Thursday. I saw a change in the project timeline that made my blood run cold. The phase labeled Load Testing and Stress Simulation had been deleted. In its place was a new block labeled Extended Public Beta. I walked over to the desk of the engineering lead, a good man who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. I pointed at the screen. "Where did the load testing go?" I asked. He didn't look up from his keyboard. Camden cut it. He said, "Simulated traffic is fake news. He wants real data. We are going to open the beta to 50,000 users on Monday and fix issues as they happen." I stared at him. That is not a beta test. That is using paying customers as guinea pigs. If the system buckles, we lose their data. We lose their trust. He finally looked at me, his eyes rimmed with red. "I know, Zara, I know, but he calls it crowdsourced quality assurance. And he told me if I push back again, he will find an engineer who has more vision." I walked away. There was nothing else to say. Camden was dismantling the safety rails and selling the scrap metal as innovation. Later that afternoon, Marissa Dale's assistant pinged me. Marissa was the chief financial officer. She was a woman of sharp angles and even sharper intellect, the kind of person who could spot a rounding error from across the room. She asked me to come to her office. When I entered, Marissa did not smile. She gestured for me to close the door. The glass walls of her office were frosted, but I could still see the blurry shapes of the Velocity consultants pacing the hallway outside. "Sit down, Zara," she said. I sat. "I saw the memo you sent," she said. "The one Camden blasted to the whole company." I waited. I did not know if she was going to fire me or reprimand me. It was bold. She continued, keeping her voice low and accurate. I exhaled. You know he's going to crash this thing. Marissa, the numbers do not add up. The infrastructure cannot handle the volume he is promising. Marissa sighed and took off her glasses. She rubbed the bridge of her nose. I know. But Randall won't listen. He is blinded by his son's ambition. He thinks Camden is the next Steve Jobs. If I try to block the budget release, Randall will overrule me. She put her glasses back on and looked me dead in the eye. I cannot stop him. Zara, but I need you to do something for me. I need you to document everything, every corner he cuts, every policy he ignores, every warning he dismisses. Why I asked, because when the bill comes due, she said, her voice turning hard, I am not going to be the one paying it, and neither should you. I nodded. I understood. We were not conspirators. We were just two people putting on life jackets while the captain drilled holes in the hull. The humiliation ritual happened the following Monday during the all-hands product demo. The entire company was gathered in the atrium. Camden was on stage, demonstrating the new one-click checkout feature. He clicked the button. The screen spun for a second, then 2, then 5. It was lagging. The room was silent. Camden laughed, but it was a nervous sound. Well, he said into the microphone, that is a little slower than we want, but that is what happens when you have legacy security protocols running in the background. He pointed a finger toward the back of the room, right where I was standing. We are working on stripping out some of those old, heavy processes that Zara's team put in place years ago, he said. They are really choking our growth. Once we get those cleared out, this thing will fly. 500 heads turned to look at me. I stood perfectly still. I did not blush. I did not look down. I looked straight at him. He was blaming me for the lag caused by his own bloated code, and he was doing it to insulate himself from criticism. He was setting up the narrative. If it works, it is Camden's genius. If it breaks, it is Zara's obstruction. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I checked it surreptitiously. It was a secure message from Ava Klein in internal audit. I just heard that. The message read, if you find evidence of him bypassing mandatory policies, send it to me. I do not care who his father is. I put the phone away. I had a mission. I went back to my desk and started digging through the ticketing system. I looked for the deployment logs for the checkout feature. I wanted to see why it was lagging, but I found something much more interesting. We have a policy called change freeze. It means that 48 hours before a major demo or launch, no new code can be pushed to the production environment unless it is a critical security patch. This ensures stability. I saw that a large code update had been pushed at 3 a.m, just 7 hours before the demo. That was a direct violation of the freeze. I clicked on the ticket details. Normally, a freeze violation requires approval from the Director of Reliability, me, or the CTO. I had not approved it. The CTO was on vacation. The ticket was marked approved. I hovered over the approval stamp. It read, Override Authority CEO Office. My heart skipped a beat. Had Randall Voss stayed up until 3 a.m. to approve a code push for his son? It was possible, but unlikely. Randall did not know how to log into Jira. I dug deeper. I pulled the access logs for the approval action. Every action in our system leaves a digital fingerprint, including the IP address of the device used. I cross-referenced the IP address. It did not come from Randall's executive suite on the top floor. It came from the subnet assigned to the product strategy offices on the 3rd floor. Specifically, it matched the static IP address assigned to the desktop computer in Camden Voss's office. I sat back. Camden had not just ignored the rules. He had used his father's supreme executive authority credentials to bypass the safety checks himself. He had logged in as the CEO to approve his own reckless behavior. This was not just bad management. This was fraud. It was a violation of the separation of duties clause in every compliance framework we adhered to. I took a screenshot. I saved the raw logs. I exported the ticket history. Marissa wanted a record. Ava wanted proof. I looked at the poster on the wall across from my desk. Move fast. Don't apologize. Camden was moving fast. All right. He was moving so fast he did not realize he was leaving footprints at the scene of the crime. I dragged the files into my hidden folder. I was not going to stop him. I was going to let him keep clicking that button until he broke his finger. I started building the cage on a rainy Tuesday evening. It was not made of steel bars or reinforced concrete. It was made of PDFs, timestamps, server logs, and email chains. In my line of work, these materials are stronger than steel because they are the only things that survive when a company burns to the ground. Most people think revenge is about shouting matches or dramatic confrontations. They are wrong. Real revenge, corporate revenge, is an administrative process. It requires filing, sorting, and indexing. I created a master file on my encrypted personal drive. I named it Project Pulse. I began dragging items into the folder one by one. Exhibit A was the initial email from Camden Voss announcing the 50% budget cut to the reliability infrastructure. That was the foundation. It proved he had crippled our defenses intentionally. Exhibit B was the screenshot of the JIRA ticket I had discovered, the one where Camden used the CEO's credentials to override the code freeze. That proved he was willing to break security protocols and impersonate an executive to get his way. Exhibit C was a log of the disabled alerts. Camden had ordered the operations team to turn off the low-level latency warnings because they were annoying him during his product walkthroughs. He called them noise. I called them the smoke detector. But the centerpiece of my collection, the weapon that would actually do the damage, was something much quieter. It was the GatePay contract. I opened the vendor agreement again. I knew the clause by heart, but I needed to trace the history of who else knew about it. The clause was titled High Velocity Transaction Integrity Review. It stated that if Northline Dynamics exceeded 3.4 million monthly active users, GatePay reserved the right to pause transaction processing for up to 48 hours to conduct a fraud audit. This was not a suggestion. It was a hard limit hard-coded into their banking APIs. The only way to avoid the pause was to submit a pre-authorization package 3 months in advance, proving our system was stable. We had not done that because Camden had fired the team responsible for preparing the package. I went into the version history of our internal risk register. This is a master spreadsheet where we list every potential threat to the business, from power outages to lawsuits. 2 months ago, I had added an entry to row 42. It read, Risk of Payment Gateway Suspension due to exceeding user volume thresholds without prior audit. I had flagged it as critical. I looked at the current version of the spreadsheet, the one Camden was using to present to the investors. Row 42 was gone. I checked the edit history. User Camden Voss, action delete row. Comment, removing theoretical blockers to keep the narrative clean. He had not just ignored the risk, he had erased it. He had hidden a landmine from the investors because he did not want to admit it was there. That was not just negligence. That was material misrepresentation. I sat back in my chair. The office was dark. Save for the cleaning crew vacuuming the carpets down the hall, I had everything I needed to protect myself. But sitting on the evidence was not enough. I needed to put it on the record officially. I needed to offer them one last chance to do the right thing, knowing full well they would refuse. I drafted a formal memo. This was different from the previous one. This was a demand for risk acceptance. It is a specific legal instrument we use in compliance. It essentially says, I have told you this is dangerous. You are forcing me to do it anyway. Sign here to admit that if this blows up, it is your fault, not mine. I addressed it to Marissa Dale, the CFO, and Anton Briggs, the general counsel. The memo was dry and emotionless. I cited the specific clause in the GatePay contract. I cited the budget cuts. I cited the projected user numbers for the Pulse Drop launch. I wrote, based on current growth projections, we will hit the 3.4 million user threshold on launch day. Without the required audit, transaction processing will cease. Please sign below to acknowledge this risk and authorize the launch to proceed despite the high probability of total revenue failure. I hit send. I waited 24 hours. Marissa did not reply. She was smart enough to know that putting anything in writing now would be dangerous. Anton Briggs replied late the next afternoon. Anton was a man who had made a career out of saying absolutely nothing while using a great many words. His email read, Zara, "Thank you for the note. We appreciate your diligence. The legal team is currently reviewing the interpretation of the GatePay covenants. We believe there is flexibility in the language. Let's circle back to this in the third quarter after the launch dust has settled. No need for formal sign-offs at this stage. We are all on the same team." I stared at the screen. Let's circle back. The polite corporate way of saying shut up and go away. He was stalling. He knew I was right, but he could not sign the document because if he did, he would be admitting that he allowed a catastrophic risk to go unchecked. By refusing to sign, he was keeping the liability on me. If the system crashed, they could claim I never adequately warned them. They could claim I was the technical owner and I failed to manage the vendor. I had anticipated this. In fact, I was counting on it. I saved Anton's email into Project Pulse as Exhibit D. I walked to the break room to get water. Ava Klein was there, stirring a cup of tea. She looked tired. Her cardigan was buttoned all the way up. A sure sign she was stressed. "Did they sign it?" she asked, without looking at me. "No," I said. "Anton told me to circle back in Q3. Ava blew on her tea. "Typical. They want the reward without the risk. They are trying to run out the clock. Zara, once the app launches, if it succeeds, you look like a worrier. If it fails, they will say you did not escalate it hard enough." "I know." I said, "I am out of options. The chain of command is broken. The CEO is the problem's father. The CFO is paralyzed. Legal is complicit." Ava turned to face me. Her eyes were sharp behind her glasses. "There is one channel left," she said. "It is the nuclear option." I knew what she meant. The board of directors. Specifically, the board risk committee. Every public company has a subcommittee of the board dedicated to risk. Their job is to protect the shareholders from the management. They are not employees. They do not report to the CEO. They report to the investors. The chair of our risk committee was a woman named Evelyn Hart. Evelyn was a legend in the industry. She was 60 years old, worth $500 million, and had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless. She hated incompetence. She hated excuses. And rumor had it, she hated nepotism more than anything else. She had famously fired a CEO at her previous company for hiring his mistress as a consultant. "You have the logs?" Ava asked. I nodded. "I have everything. If you send this to Evelyn," Ava said, lowering her voice, "there is no going back. If you are wrong, you will be fired for insubordination and breaching the chain of command. You will never work in this industry again. And if I am right," I asked. Ava smiled a thin, dangerous smile. "If you are right, she will burn this place down to save the stock price." I went back to my desk. My heart was hammering against my ribs. This was it. I was about to bypass the general counsel, the CFO, and the CEO. I was about to throw a grenade into the boardroom. I drafted a new email. The recipient was eHeart Board, Northline Dynamics. Com, subject urgent material, unclosed risk regarding pulse drop launch. Whistleblower report. I did not write a long story. Evelyn Hart did not have time for stories. I wrote bullet points. 1. Executive management has deleted critical risk assessments from investor documentation regarding the GatePay transaction limit of 3.4 million users. 2. Budget required for compliance audit was removed by VP of product strategy, despite written warnings. 3. CEO credentials were used to override mandatory code-free security protocols on November 12. 4. Legal and finance have refused to sign risk acceptance for the impending breach of vendor contract. Attached is the full evidentiary audit trail. I hovered my mouse over the send button. I looked around the office. I saw the young engineers wearing headphones, unaware that they were coding inside a burning building. I saw the posters on the wall telling us to move fast. I saw Camden's office door, closed as usual. He thought the rules did not apply to him because his last name was on the building. He thought he could bully the laws of mathematics and contract law just like he bullied his subordinates. I pressed send. The email vanished from my outbox. I sat there for a moment, listening to the hum of the servers in the distance. I felt a strange sense of calm. The trap was set. The bait was laid. Now, all I had to do was wait for Camden to walk into it. He wanted to reach 3.4 million users. I was going to make sure that when he did. Evelyn Hart was watching. The summons came at 10 in the morning on a Thursday. It was a calendar invite from Camden Voss, titled Simply Strategic Alignment. The location was Conference Room Alpha, the glass-walled fishbowl right in the center of the executive wing. It was the kind of room designed to make sure everyone in the office could see who was inside, but could hear absolutely nothing of what was being screamed. I walked in with my laptop under my arm. Camden was sitting at the head of the table, flanked by the Vice President of Human Resources, a woman named Linda who always smiled like she was delivering bad news to a toddler. Camden did not stand up. He slid a sleek black tablet across the mahogany table toward me. "Sit down. Zara," he said. "We need to finalize the structure for the launch." I sat. I did not touch the tablet. "We are streamlining the accountability chart." Camden continued. "Since we have optimized the budget, we need to make sure the ownership lines are clear. Linda drafted this up. It is a standard performance and reliability guarantee. We just need your signature to confirm you are the owner of the platform's stability under the new operating model." I looked at the tablet. The document was glowing on the screen. It was titled, Executive Ownership Attestation Pulse Drop Launch Stability. I began to read. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was crystal clear. It stated that I, Zara Cruz, acknowledge the adequacy of the current resources and budget. It stated that I personally guaranteed the system would meet all service-level agreements. It stated that any failure of the system would be a result of execution error, not resource deficiency. It was a trap, a beautiful, legal, watertight trap. If I signed this, I was agreeing that the 50% budget cut was fine. If I signed this, when the system inevitably crashed, Camden could pull this document out and say, "See?" The director of reliability said she had everything she needed. She just failed to do her job. I pushed the tablet back toward him. "I cannot sign this. Camden." Camden's smile tightened at the edges. "Why not?" "It is just a formality." "Zara, it is part of your job description. It is not a formality." I said, keeping my voice level. "This document states that I agree the current budget is sufficient to maintain stability. I do not agree. I have sent multiple memos stating that the budget is insufficient. If I sign this, I am committing perjury against my own professional judgment." Linda from HR leaned forward. "Zara," she said softly, "we are trying to empower you. We want you to take ownership. Refusing to sign a role definition document could be interpreted as a refusal to perform your duties. That is grounds for termination." There it was. The ultimatum. Sign the lie, or lose your job. I looked at Linda, then back at Camden. "I will sign it," I said, "if we add an addendum." Camden raised an eyebrow. "An addendum? Yes," I said. "I will sign a document that says I am responsible for reliability, provided we attach a Schedule B listing the specific risks I have flagged: the lack of load testing, the reduced on-call staff, and the gate pay transaction limit of 3.4 million users. If we include those exceptions, I will sign." Camden laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. "We are not attaching a laundry list of your paranoia to a strategic document. Zara, that defeats the purpose. This is about confidence. Then I cannot sign it," I repeated. Camden leaned back in his chair. He stopped smiling. His eyes went cold. "You know, Zara," he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous register, "you are becoming a bottleneck. And in this company, we remove bottlenecks. If you are not comfortable leading this team, maybe we should revoke your administrative access today. Right now, we can find someone else who has the vision to sign this." He was threatening to lock me out. He was threatening to strip my credentials before I could secure the evidence I needed. I stood up. I placed my hands on the table and leaned in. You can revoke my access. Camden, you can take my badge. You can escort me out of the building. But administrative access does not change the laws of physics. When that traffic hits the servers, and when GatePay sees 3.4 million users, the system is going to crash, and no amount of changing the locks is going to change the truth. Camden waved a hand dismissively. Get out. Linda will be in touch about your transition. Linda gave me a pitying look. We can discuss a role shift. Zara, perhaps an individual contributor role would be less stressful for you. We can move you to the legacy maintenance team. They were trying to demote me. They wanted to keep me in the building so they could blame me, but strip me of the power to stop them. I turned and walked out of the glass room. I could feel the eyes of the entire office on me. They saw the tension. They saw the way I held my head high. They knew something was wrong. I walked straight toward the elevators. I needed air. I needed to think. As I passed the break area near the compliance office, a hand reached out and grabbed my arm. It was Ava Klein. She pulled me into the alcove by the vending machines. Her face was pale. She looked terrified. Zara, she whispered, what did you just do? I refused to sign. I said, they tried to make me sign a guarantee for the new budget. I told them to go to hell. Ava stared at me. Her grip on my arm tightened. You refused. You are sure? Yes. Ava, I just walked out of the room 5 seconds ago. Why? Ava pulled out her phone. She opened the internal document management system app. She navigated to the pending executions folder. Because, she said, showing me the screen. The system just sent me a notification. The executive ownership attestation was just finalized. I looked at the small screen. There was the document. And at the bottom, there was a digital signature, Zara Cruz. It was stamped and dated. 1 minute ago. My stomach dropped. I felt a cold wave of nausea wash over me. That is not possible. I said, I was in the room. I did not touch the tablet. I did not log in. Ava looked at me with wide eyes. It is a valid cryptographic signature. Zara, it used your private key. It is legally binding. According to this system, you just agreed to everything. You just signed your own death warrant. I realized instantly what had happened. This was not just pressure. This was a crime. Camden had not just threatened me. He had prepared for my refusal. I need a computer. I said, now. We ran to Ava's desk. It was tucked away in the corner, shielded from the main floor. I sat down and logged into the back-end audit logs. My hands were shaking, but my typing was precise. I pulled up the identity and access management logs for the last 10 minutes. I filtered by my user ID. There it was. A login event, a document execution event, user Zara Cruz, action signed document. Time, 10:14 in the morning. I looked at the source IP address of the command. If I had signed it, the IP would have matched the tablet in the conference room, or it would have matched my laptop. I traced the IP. It was a hardwired connection. It was not on the wireless network. I ran a device lookup. Device name. Prod Strat Exec 01. I knew that device name. It was the primary desktop computer in the Vice President of Product Strategy's office, Camden Voss. He had someone in his office waiting for his signal, or perhaps he had a remote script set up, while he was looking me in the eye, pretending to negotiate, pretending to give me a choice. He had already decided to forge my signature. He had stolen my digital identity. He had falsified a corporate record to frame me for the disaster he was creating. I looked at Ava. She was looking at the screen, her mouth slightly open. That is a felony, she whispered. That is identity theft. That is corporate fraud. I took a screenshot. I exported the raw JSON log files. I saved them to a thumb drive Ava handed me. I did not feel anger anymore. Anger is hot. Anger is messy. What I felt was ice cold. Camden Voss had made a fatal error. He thought he was playing a game of bullying. He thought he could just overpower me with his title. But by faking my signature, he had crossed the line from bad management into criminal liability. He had just handed me the weapon that would kill him. I pulled the thumb drive out of the computer. Ava, I said, standing up, do not tell anyone you saw this. "Where are you going?" she asked. "I am going to let them demote me." I said, "I'm going to let them think they won." Because now I knew something they did not. The document they were going to use to bury me was actually the shovel they had used to dig their own graves. I walked back toward my desk. Linda from HR was waiting for me with a folder in her hand, ready to discuss my new, lowered position. I smiled at her. "I am ready to cooperate." "Linda," I said. She looked relieved. She had no idea that the woman standing in front of her was not a defeated employee. I was a witness, and the trial was about to begin. The week leading up to the launch felt less like engineering and more like watching a car crash in slow motion. The silence in the operations center was the loudest thing I had ever heard. Under the new lean structure, my team had been reduced to a skeleton crew. The wall of monitors that usually flashed red, yellow, and green with real-time health checks was now mostly dark. This was not because the system was healthy. It was because Camden had ordered the sensitivity levels turned down. He called it noise reduction. I called it blinding the pilot. We used to get alerts the second a server's CPU usage spiked above 70%. Now the system was configured to only notify us if the server actually died and stayed dead for 5 minutes. Even then, the alert did not go to our pagers. It went into a Daily Digest email scheduled to be delivered at 8 in the morning the next day. They had replaced the fire alarm with a morning newspaper that would tell us our house had burned down the night before, while the technical side was being suffocated. The marketing side was hyperventilating. Camden was burning cash at a rate that made me physically ill. I walked past the marketing wing and saw the maps on the wall. He had purchased billboard space in Times Square, Piccadilly Circus, and Shibuya Crossing. He had signed contracts with 3 massive TikTok influencers, paying them $200,000 each to post a video at exactly 9 in the morning on launch day. The strategy was called Pulse Drop. The idea was to create a massive, synchronized spike in traffic. He wanted everyone in the world to open the app at the exact same second. He was not building a business. He was building a distributed denial of service attack against his own company. I tried one last time to intervene. I went to Marissa Dale's office on Tuesday. The CFO looked like she had aged 5 years in 5 days. Her desk was covered in paper. "Marissa," I said, standing in her doorway, "I am not asking for the budget back. I am asking for a throttle. We need to keep the rate-limiting keys in the API active. If we get hit with 5 million requests in 1 minute, the database will lock up. Let me keep the safety valve on." Marissa looked at me, then looked at the ceiling. She whispered so softly I almost could not hear her. "I cannot do it. Zara, Camden has convinced the board that throttling is leaving money on the table. He showed them a projection where every rejected connection is a lost customer. If I authorize a throttle and we miss the revenue target, it is my head." She looked down at her papers. "Just keep your head down. Zara, let him have his launch." I walked out. I realized then that Marissa was not going to save us. She was just hoping the explosion would not hit her office. On Wednesday, I discovered that Camden had stopped trusting the standard deployment pipeline entirely. He was paranoid that my team would secretly slow down the code. So, he did something unprecedented. He hired an external DevOps contractor to build a shadow release path. They called it the Velocity Pipeline. It bypassed our staging environment. It bypassed the automated security scans. It bypassed the load balancers. It was a direct line from the developer's laptop to the production servers. It was the digital equivalent of wiring the fuse box with a copper penny. I did not fight it. I did not scream. I simply documented it. I took screenshots of the new network topology. I saved the emails where the external contractors asked for root access. I added it all to the evidence folder. Then came the warning from the bank. It arrived on Thursday afternoon, less than 24 hours before launch. It was an automated email from GatePay, flagged with high importance. Subject integrity review warning. Volume anomaly detected. The email stated that their predictive algorithms had noticed our marketing spend and projected traffic patterns. It warned us that if our transaction error rate exceeded 1% during a high-volume event, their system would automatically trigger the fraud protection protocol. This would freeze all funds and decline all cards until a manual review could be completed. It was the exact scenario I had predicted. The exact scenario Camden had deleted from the risk register. I forwarded the email to Camden, Marissa, and Anton Briggs. "This is the hard stop," I wrote. "We need to ramp up slowly. If we hit them with everything at once, GatePay will shut us down." Camden replied 3 minutes later. He did not hit reply all. He just replied to me. "Zara, you are obsessing over edge cases again. I just got off the phone with their account rep. They said it is standard boilerplate language. Do not kill the vibe. We launch as planned." He was lying. I knew he was lying because GatePay does not have account reps who can override the fraud algorithm. The algorithm is the law, but I had his reply. I had his dismissal in writing. I left my desk and went to find Ava Klein. She was in the server room, which was strictly against protocol for an auditor. But these were strange times. She was standing next to the rack that held the physical log backups. "Did you do it?" I asked. Ava nodded. She looked at the blinking lights on the black tower. "I put a hard lock on the retention policy," she said. "I changed the admin password for the archive server. Even if Camden gets root access to the main system, he cannot wipe the history. The logs of what happens tomorrow will be written to a write-only drive. They can be read, but they cannot be deleted or modified." "Good," I said, "because he is going to try to blame the infrastructure. He is going to say the servers failed. We need the logs to prove that the servers did exactly what they were told to do." Ava looked at me. "You know they're going to try to fire you tomorrow, right? When this goes sideways, they will need a sacrifice." "I know." I said, "I am counting on it." I spent the rest of the afternoon preparing my personal defense. I was not planting bugs. I was not writing malicious code. I was simply ensuring that the truth had an escape route. I exported my entire email history to an encrypted external drive. I downloaded the configuration files that showed the disabled alerts. I saved the chat logs where the engineers discussed the lack of rollback plans. I was building a black box for the plane crash. Night fell over Raleigh. The office did not empty out. Instead, it filled up. This was the night before launch. The atmosphere was manic. Pizza boxes were stacked high on the tables. Energy drinks were being passed around like holy water. The marketing team was popping champagne in the break room, celebrating a victory that had not happened yet. Camden was in the center of it all. He was wearing a t-shirt that said Pulse Drop in neon letters. He looked energized, almost feverish. At 10 o'clock at night, he gathered the engineering leads in the war room. I stood at the back, leaning against the wall. "All right, everyone," Camden announced, clapping his hands. "We are ahead of schedule. The build is ready. I want to push the final release candidate to production now. That way, when the influencers post in the morning, the system is already hot." One of the senior engineers raised his hand. His hand was shaking. "Camden," he said, "we haven't done a rollback drill for this build. If there is a bug, we don't have a clean way to revert to the previous version without taking the site down for an hour." Camden waved him off. "We do not look back," he said. "We only look forward. If there is a bug, we fix it forward. We patch it live. We are not going to delay the future because we are afraid of a typo." He looked around the room, his eyes wild and bright. "Ship it," he ordered. The engineer looked at me. I said nothing. I just watched. The engineer turned back to his keyboard and pressed the enter key. The code went out. The velocity pipeline took it straight to the live environment. There were no checks. There were no balances. Camden pumped his fist in the air. "There it is," he shouted. He turned to the room, beaming. "Get some rest. Everyone, tomorrow, we make headlines." I looked at him and felt a strange sense of detachment. He was right. We were absolutely going to make headlines, just not the kind he thought. I walked back to my desk and packed my bag. I took my notebook. I took my external hard drive. I took the picture of my kids off my desk. I looked at the dashboard one last time. The user count was low, hovering around 10,000. The servers were humming quietly. They were waiting. Tomorrow, 3.4 million people were going to knock on the door all at once, and thanks to Camden Voss, we had taken the door off the hinges and thrown away the key. I turned off the lights in my office and walked out into the cool night air. The countdown had begun. The lobby of Northline Dynamics looked less like a technology company and more like a nightclub where the cover charge was your dignity. They had removed the reception desk and replaced it with a DJ booth. A man with frosted tips was spinning upbeat electronic dance music at a volume that made the glass walls vibrate. There were balloon arches in the company colors, silver and blue, and waiters circulating with trays of expensive hors d'oeuvres that no one was eating because everyone was too nervous. On a raised platform in the center of the atrium, a massive LED screen had been erected. It displayed a single, pulsating number, the active user count for Pulse Drop. I was not invited to the VIP section near the stage. That area was reserved for the executives, the board members, and the marketing team. Instead, I sat at a folding table in the back corner, near the fire exit. This was the makeshift command center for the support team. It was me, 3 junior sysadmins, and a pot of lukewarm coffee. We were the designated buzzkills, hidden away so our anxious faces would not spoil the aesthetic of the launch. At 9 in the morning, the music cut out, a spotlight hit the stage, and Randall Voss walked out. The CEO looked impeccable in a navy suit. He held a microphone and looked out at the sea of employees and investors. "Welcome to the future," Randall said, his voice booming. "For 30 years, Northline has been a steady ship, but today, we stop being steady. Today, we become fast. I want to introduce the architect of this new era, the man who pushed us to be bolder than we ever thought possible. My son, Camden Voss." The applause was thunderous. I watched Camden jog onto the stage. He hugged his father. It was a touching moment. If you ignored the fact that the son was about to drive the father's legacy off a cliff, Camden took the mic. He did not have notes. He just had swagger. "They told us we could not do it," Camden shouted, pointing vaguely at the ceiling. "They told us we needed months of testing. They told us we needed to be safe. But look at the screen." He gestured behind him. The influencer campaigns had just gone live. The counter on the screen began to spin. 10,000 users, 50,000, 100,000. The number was climbing vertically. It was the kind of traffic spike that usually signals a distributed denial of service attack. But this was self-inflicted. I looked down at my laptop. I had my own dashboard open. It was the sanitized version, the one with the alerts dampened. But I knew how to read the raw data underneath the glossy interface. At 200,000 users, the latency on the database queries jumped from 20 milliseconds to 200 milliseconds. That is a tenfold increase. The system was already breathing hard. At 500,000 users, the first timeout errors appeared in the logs. They were small, just a flicker of red text scrolling past on my secondary monitor. I looked at the sysadmin next to me, a young guy named Kevin. He was staring at the screen, pale and sweating. "The load balancers are heating up," Kevin whispered. "Zone B is hitting 80% capacity. Should we spin up more instances?" "We can't," I said quietly. Camden locked the autoscaler budget. "We have what we have. Just pray the caching layer holds." On stage, Camden was ecstatic. 500,000, he screamed. 500,000 people in 10 minutes. We are viral, baby. The crowd cheered. They were cheering for the number. They did not understand that the number was a weight, and the floorboards were creaking. At 1.2 million users, the cracks became visible to the naked eye. I saw the login success rate drop to 95%. That meant 5% of the people trying to give us money were getting an error message. In the world of e-commerce, 5% is a disaster. It is burning money in a fireplace. I stood up. I could not just sit there and watch it burn. I had to try one last time. I walked through the crowd, pushing past account executives and graphic designers who were holding glasses of champagne. I made my way to the side of the stage where Camden had just stepped down to high-five his father. "Camden," I called out. He turned, his face flushed with adrenaline. He looked at me like I was a ghost at a wedding. "Zara, what are you doing here? You should be at the support desk. We are at 1.2 million, I said, keeping my voice low but urgent. "The database write latency is spiking. We are seeing dropped packets. We need to throttle the signups." Throttle. Camden laughed. He actually laughed. You want me to stop the party because you are seeing some dropped packets. It is not just packets, Camden. It is the payment gateway. If we keep ramping at this speed, we are going to hit the hard limit on the GatePay contract. We need to do a phased rollout. Put the new users in a queue. Let the system catch its breath. Randall Voss turned to look at us. What is going on? Is there a problem? Camden put a hand on his father's shoulder. No problem. Dad, Zara is just doing her thing. She gets nervous when the numbers get big. She wants to slow down the intake because her old servers are sweating a little. He turned back to me, his eyes cold and hard. Go back to your table. Zara, do not ruin the mood. We are not throttling. We are not queuing. We are breaking records. But the error rate, I started. You are the error rate. Camden snapped. He turned his back on me and walked his father toward the buffet. I stood there for a moment, stunned by the absolute arrogance. He was not just reckless. He was delusional. He believed his own marketing so much that he thought it could override technical reality. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text from Ava Klein. Evelyn Hart is watching the live stream. She just emailed the board. She wants to know why the latency is visible on the consumer front end. She knows. I looked up at the balcony overlooking the atrium. I could not see Evelyn, but I could feel her presence. She was the predator in the tall grass, waiting for the gazelle to trip. I walked back to the support table. The mood there had shifted from anxiety to panic. Kevin was typing furiously. Zara, he said, his voice cracking. I am seeing something weird. The sign-up velocity is too clean. There is almost no friction. Usually, when people sign up, they make typos. They get password errors. This traffic is flowing in like water. I looked at the intake logs. He was right. The sign-up process was suspiciously fast. Then another engineer, a kid named Ben who worked on the front-end team, walked over to our table. He looked like he was about to vomit. He was holding a can of soda that he was crushing in his hand. Zara, Ben said, I need to tell you something. What is it? Ben. Last night, he said, looking over his shoulder to make sure no one was listening. Camden came to my desk. He said the address verification check and the CAPTCHA were adding too much friction. He said we were losing 30% of users at the sign-up screen. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. What did he make you do? He made me disable them, Ben whispered. He made me comment out the code for the fraud checks. He said we could turn them back on next week. I closed my eyes. It was worse than I thought. He had removed the doors. Camden had not just invited the world to a party. He had invited every bot, scraper, and credit card testing script on the internet to come in and steal the silverware, without CAPTCHA and address verification. A significant portion of that traffic wasn't real people. It was automated attacks. That explained the speed. That explained the load. I looked at the dashboard. The user count was at 2.8 million. The transaction error rate was no longer flickering. It was climbing a steady red line. 2%, 3%, 4%. This was not a glitch. This was not a hiccup. I looked at the screen on the stage. Camden was back up there, microphone in hand. 3 million, he screamed. We are about to make history. He was right. We were about to hit 3.4 million. And because he had turned off the fraud checks, GatePay's algorithms were going to see a massive flood of unverified transactions hitting their servers all at once. They would not see a successful launch. They would see a massive, coordinated financial attack. I sat down and put my hands on the keyboard. I did not try to stop it. It was too late to stop it. I opened a new terminal window. What are you doing? Kevin asked. I am running a trace. I said, I want to capture the exact millisecond when the heart stops beating. The counter on the wall hit 3.2 million. The crowd was roaring. The music was pumping. I watched the red line on my screen. It was rising to meet the blue line of the user count. When they crossed, the lights would go out. I took a deep breath. The applause was deafening, but all I could hear was the sound of a structural support beam snapping in half. The support queue was not just red, it was bleeding. I sat at the folding table in the corner, watching the ticket counter tick upward like a speedometer on a race car that had lost its brakes. 500 tickets, 1,000 tickets, 2,000 tickets. The complaints were not about the user interface or the color scheme. They were about money. I was charged twice. My cart emptied itself after I paid. Where is my refund? This app is a scam. Beside me, Kevin, the young sysadmin, had stopped typing. He was staring at his screen with a look of pure horror. "Zara," he whispered, "I am seeing reports of cross-account data leakage. A user in Ohio just logged in and saw the credit card details of a user in Texas. I felt the blood drain from my face. That was it. That was the nightmare scenario. Because Camden had forced the removal of the caching safeguards to increase speed. The server was serving cached session data to the wrong users. We were not just crashing. We were leaking personal financial data to strangers. I grabbed my laptop and stood up. I had to stop this. The atrium was still a rave. The DJ was playing a remix of a popular pop song, and the bass was thumping against my chest on the giant screen. The user count hit 2.5 million. The employees were dancing. They were taking selfies. They were celebrating the destruction of their own company. I found Camden near the VIP bar. He was holding a glass of champagne, laughing with the vice president of marketing. "Camden," I shouted over the music. He turned, his smile faltering for a fraction of a second when he saw my face. "Zara," he yelled back, acting like we were old friends. "Come have a drink. We are crushing it. We are not crushing it," I said, leaning in close so he could hear me. "We are leaking data. Users are seeing other people's credit cards. The support queue is exploding. You need to kill the feed. Now." Camden rolled his eyes. He put a hand on my shoulder, a gesture that was meant to be comforting but felt like a restraint. "Relax, Zara. It is just a glitch. Every launch has glitches. It is a sign of demand. The system is just adjusting to the volume. It is not a glitch," I snapped, pushing his hand away. "It is a security breach. Look at Twitter. Look at the hashtag." Camden pulled out his phone. I watched him scroll. I saw the tweets. People were posting screenshots of the errors. They were calling PulseDrop a disaster. He did not look worried. He looked annoyed. He turned to the marketing VP. "Hey," he said, "the narrative is getting a little negative online. Let's pivot. Get the social team to post that meme we worked on, the one with the cute sloth hugging a server. Caption it. We are so popular, we are overheating, bear with us. Make it look like a quirky growing pain." I stared at him. He was fighting a data breach with a meme of a sloth. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a high-priority alert, but it was not from our system. It was from the General Counsel. Anton Briggs. Subject urgent. GatePay compliance inquiry. I opened the email. GatePay had sent a formal notice of integrity review. It was the second warning. Transaction error rate has exceeded 2.5%. Automated fraud detection is pending activation. Please provide proof of risk acceptance and stress test certification immediately, or service will be suspended. Anton Briggs appeared out of the crowd. He looked sweaty. He was holding his tablet. "Camden," Anton said, his voice tight. "GatePay is threatening to pull the plug. They are asking for the compliance docs. Do we have the signed risk assessment? Zara said she didn't sign it." I looked at Anton. He was looking at me with accusation. "I didn't sign it," I said clearly. I refused to sign it because the risk was too high. Camden did not blink. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his own phone. He tapped the screen a few times and held it up for Anton to see. "What are you talking about?" Camden said smoothly. "It is right here. Signed and dated yesterday." I looked at the screen. It was the executive ownership attestation, and there, at the bottom, was my digital signature, the one he had forged. Anton let out a sigh of relief. "Okay, good. I will forward this to GatePay Legal immediately. That should buy us some time. It proves we accepted the error rate as an operational variance." Anton turned to walk away. I stepped in front of him. "Anton, wait." Then I turned to Camden. The music seemed to fade away. The noise of the party became a dull roar in the background. "You used my signature," I said. My voice was low, but it was steady. "You logged into my account from your office, and you signed that document." Camden took a step closer to me. We were standing in the middle of 500 people. But we were alone. "Zara," he said, his voice a hiss. "Do not do this. Not here. You forged my name." I repeated. "To cover your negligence, I did what had to be done to get this company moving." Camden said, "You were stalling. You were being difficult. I just removed the friction. That is what leaders do. That is fraud." I said. Camden smiled. It was a terrifying, empty smile. "Who are they going to believe?" he asked. "The director of reliability, who has been complaining for months, or the vice president whose name is on the building? Look around you. Zara, everyone is happy. The stock is going to double tomorrow. Do not be the person who turns on the lights and ruins the party. Just take the win." He was betting on my silence. He was betting that I would be too afraid of the scene, too afraid of his power, to speak up. Before I could answer, a woman with a headset ran up to us. She was the account director for our largest retail partner, a massive fashion brand that had an exclusive drop on the app today. "Camden," she screamed, "I have the VP of merchandising on the line. They are seeing a 60% failure rate on checkout. They are saying their customers are being double charged. They are threatening to tweet that Pulse Drop is unsafe and pull the partnership. You have 60 minutes to fix it." Camden's face finally cracked. The arrogance slipped, revealing the panic underneath. "Tell them it is a display error," he shouted. "Tell them the transactions are going through." "They are not going through," the account director yelled back. "The money is not moving." I stepped forward. "We need to roll back," I said. Camden whipped his head around to look at me. "What we need to roll back to the previous version?" I said. "We need to take the site down for emergency maintenance. We put up a 'We will be back soon' page. We revert the code. We turn the fraud checks back on. We save the data." "No," Camden said immediately. "Camden, it is the only way to stop the bleeding." I said. "No," he shouted. "Rollback means failure. If we take the site down now, the stock tanks, the press will eat us alive. We do not go back. We fix forward." "You cannot fix this forward," I argued. "The pipe is too small for the water. Get the engineers to patch it live." Camden screamed, "I do not care what it costs. Throw money at it, but that dashboard stays up." He pointed at the giant screen. 2.9 million users. The crowd cheered again. They were cheering for the iceberg. Camden turned his back on me and started shouting orders at the account director. I walked away. I felt a vibration in my pocket. I looked at my phone. It was Ava. I saw Anton send the document. The message read. I checked the audit trail. He sent the forged PDF to GatePay. It is done. He just submitted fraudulent evidence to a federal banking partner. I typed back. "Are the logs safe locked and mirrored?" Ava replied. "If they try to blame you, we have the IP address. We have the timestamps. We have the gun and the bullets." I looked up at the stage. The number was climbing faster now. The bots were swarming. 3 million, 3.1 million. I walked back to the support table. Kevin and Ben were sitting there in silence. They had stopped answering tickets. There was no point. It was like trying to bail out the Titanic with a teaspoon. "Just watch," I told them. "Watch what Kevin asked. Watch the justice system at work." I said, on my laptop screen. The internal monitoring dashboard was flashing red. The error rate was now at 5%. The database CPU was at 100%. And then, I saw the message I had been waiting for. It was a system alert from the payment processor API. It appeared in the debug log in bright yellow text. Warning, transaction volume approaching absolute contract limit. Current volume 340, 112. Active sessions, integrity. Lock trigger 400,000. I looked at the big screen on the stage. 3.3 million. The room was electric. The employees were counting down like it was New Year's Eve. "We are almost there," Camden screamed into the microphone. 3.4 million. That is the magic number. That is the record. He had no idea how right he was. It was the magic number. It was the number that would turn his golden carriage back into a pumpkin. I sat back in my chair and folded my arms. 3.35 million. 3.38 million. The crowd was chanting. Push, push, push. I looked at the code on my screen. I saw the line from GatePay. Status active. Integrity check. Pending. 3.39 million. Camden raised his champagne glass high in the air. And now he screamed. The counter hit 3.4 million. On my screen, the status line changed instantly. Status suspended. Reason integrity. Violation. Automated lockdown. I closed my laptop. The silence was coming, and it was going to be deafening. The number 3.4 million flashed on the massive LED screen in the atrium. For exactly 3 seconds, it was a moment of triumph. Confetti cannons fired from the balcony, raining silver and blue glitter down on the crowd. The bass dropped. The employees screamed. Camden Voss threw his arms wide, soaking in the adoration like a messiah of the digital age. Then, the invisible guillotine fell. It did not happen with an explosion. It happened with a stillness that was far more terrifying. On the screen behind Camden, the graph that had been climbing vertically suddenly flatlined. Then, it plummeted. The user count dropped from 3.4 million to 0 in the span of a single heartbeat. A collective gasp went through the room. The music was still thumping, but the energy had been sucked out of the air. At my table in the corner, my laptop screen turned a violent shade of red. The error logs were scrolling so fast they were a blur. Status 503 service unavailable. Status 502. Bad gateway. Status payment processor connection refused. GatePay had done exactly what they promised. They had detected the volume breach, flagged the lack of an integrity audit, and pulled the kill switch. They had severed the connection between our app and the banking system, but it was worse than just a payment failure. When the payment gateway rejected the connections, the Pulse Drop app didn't know how to handle it gracefully because Camden had ordered the error handling code removed to save space. So, the app panicked. It instantly retried the connection. 3.4 million apps tried to reconnect at the exact same millisecond. The database, already redlining, was hit with a retry storm that no infrastructure on Earth could have survived without throttling. The servers didn't just crash, they seized up. The load balancers collapsed. The login servers timed out. The Pulse Drop app was now a brick on 3 million phones. The noise in the lobby changed. The cheering stopped. The murmuring began. Then came the sound of 500 phones buzzing with notifications. I looked at Twitter on my second monitor. The hashtag PulseDrop was trending, but not for the reason Camden wanted. I just got charged $50 and the app crashed. Where's my money? PulseCart stole my money. Scam drop. The screen on stage went black. Then it rebooted to a blue Windows error screen. The irony was so thick you could taste it. Camden stood on stage, his arms still half raised, looking back at the giant blue error message. He looked small. He looked confused. Then, the panic hit him. He jumped off the stage and sprinted toward the corner where I was sitting. He did not look like a leader anymore. He looked like a child who had broken a vase and needed his mother to hide the pieces. "Zara," he screamed, skidding to a halt at my table. "Fix it." I sat perfectly still. My hands were in my lap. "I cannot fix it." "Camden," I said calmly, "what do you mean you cannot fix it?" He was spitting as he yelled, "You are the director of reliability." Reboot the servers. Spin up more instances. Do something. I looked him in the eye. I cannot spin up more instances because you cut the budget for the autoscaler. I cannot reboot the servers because the database is corrupted from the retry storm. And I cannot turn the payments back on because GatePay has blacklisted us. Camden slammed his fist on the table. The coffee cups jumped. "Call GatePay. Tell them to turn it back on." "I cannot call them." I said, "We do not have an enterprise support contract anymore. You canceled it. We have to submit a ticket via the web form. Response time is 48 hours. Camden looked like he was going to hit me. His face was purple. Veins were bulging in his neck. Behind him, the crowd parted. Randall Voss, the CEO, was walking toward us. He was not running. He was walking with the stiff, terrified gait of a man watching his net worth evaporate. "Camden," Randall said, his voice trembling, "the investors are calling. They say the stock is down 12% in the last 4 minutes. CNN is running a ticker about a massive data breach. What is happening?" "It is just a glitch," Dad Camden shouted, spinning around. "Zara is refusing to help. She is sabotaging me." Randall looked at me. Zara. I stood up. I did not look at Camden. I looked at the CEO. It is not a glitch, Mr. Voss. It is a contract enforcement action. We hit 3.4 million users. GatePay shut us down because we did not perform the mandatory fraud audit. Randall looked at his son. You told me the audit was done. You showed me the signed risk acceptance form from Zara. Camden opened his mouth, but no sound came out. At that moment, Anton Briggs, the general counsel, pushed his way through the circle of silent employees that had formed around us. He was holding his phone, and his face was the color of ash. Randall, Anton said, his voice breathless. We have a major problem. We know, Randall snapped. The app is down. No, Anton said, shaking his head frantically. It is worse. GatePay just responded to the document I sent them. They ran a metadata check on the signature. Anton looked at me. Then he looked at Camden. He took a step away from Camden, creating physical distance between himself and the vice president. They are claiming the signature is invalid, Anton said. They have logged the IP address where the document was signed. It does not match Zara's location. It matches the static IP of the executive office on the 3rd floor. The silence in the atrium was absolute. The DJ had unplugged his equipment. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sirens of emergency vehicles that seemed to be getting closer. Though that was likely just my imagination. Randall Voss looked at his son. The realization hit him like a physical blow. You signed it? Randall whispered. You signed her name? Camden looked around wild-eyed. He saw the cameras. The event videographers were still filming. They were capturing every second of this. It was an administrative override, Camden shouted, his voice cracking. She was obstructing the business. I had to do it. I did it for the company. Anton Briggs closed his eyes. That is forgery. Camden, that is fraud. And because we submitted it to a federally regulated payment processor, it is wire fraud. Camden froze. The word fraud hung in the air. I checked my phone. It was vibrating. Unknown number. I knew who it was. There was only one person who would call at this exact moment. I answered it. This is Zara. The voice on the other end was like jagged glass. This is Evelyn Hart. I did not need to ask how she got my number. Evelyn Hart knew everything. Are you safe? She asked. I am in the lobby. I said, Can you prove you warned them? She asked. Yes. Can you prove the signature is fake? Yes. Send it to me, she commanded. All of it. Now? I hung up. I pulled the encrypted flash drive from my pocket and plugged it into my laptop. I attached the folder named Project Pulse. It contained the emails, the memos, the logs of the deleted risk register, the screenshot of the admin override, and the forensic trace of the forged signature. I hit send. Camden was still screaming at his father. We can fix this. We just need to blame the vendor. We issue a statement saying GatePay had an outage. Randall was shaking his head. He looked old. He looked broken. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Evelyn. Received. Do not say another word to anyone. Go home. Put on a suit. Then a second text. Emergency board meeting. 9 o'clock tonight. You are coming into the room with me. I closed my laptop. I unplugged the flash drive. I looked at Camden. He was grabbing Anton's lapels, begging him to find a loophole. I looked at Randall. He was staring at the floor, realizing that the new generation of leadership he had promised the world was currently being live-streamed having a mental breakdown. I picked up my bag. Where are you going? Camden screamed at me. You cannot leave. You have to fix this. I stopped and looked at him one last time. I am not the one who broke it. Camden. I walked through the crowd. The employees parted from me like the Red Sea. They looked at me with a mixture of fear and awe. They knew. They had seen the logs. They had heard the conversation. I walked past the DJ booth. I walked past the untouched champagne tower. I walked out the glass doors into the bright sunlight of the parking lot. Behind me, Northline Dynamics was burning. The stock price was in freefall. The user base was rioting. The legal team was hyperventilating. I got into my car and sat there for a moment. My hands were steady. My heart rate was normal. I drove home. I had 4 hours before the meeting. I needed to shower. I needed to iron my best blazer. Tonight, I was not going to be the director of reliability. Tonight, I was going to be the executioner. The conference room on the executive floor was soundproof, which was fortunate because the silence inside was loud enough to shatter glass. It was 9 o'clock at night. The city lights of Raleigh flickered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, indifferent to the corporate execution that was about to take place. We were seated around the long oval table. At the head sat Randall Voss, the CEO. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. His tie was loosened, and his face was gray. To his right was Marissa Dale, the CFO, who was furiously typing on her laptop, calculating the hemorrhage of money. To his left was Anton Briggs, the general counsel, who was staring at a stack of documents like they were radioactive. And then there was Camden. The boy king sat slumped in his chair. The swagger was gone. The neon t-shirt was gone, replaced by a wrinkled dress shirt. He looked pale, sweaty, and small. I sat at the far end of the table. I was wearing my best blazer. My hands were folded on the table. Beside me sat Evelyn Hart, the chair of the board risk committee. She did not look at me. She stared directly at Randall. "We are not here to debate," Evelyn said. Her voice was low and devoid of warmth. "We are here to assess the damage and assign liability. Zara, please proceed." I did not stand up. I did not need to perform. I simply slid a single sheet of paper across the polished mahogany surface toward Randall. "This is a timeline," I said. Randall picked it up. His hand was shaking slightly. "Item 1, I said. 3 months ago, Camden cut the reliability budget by 50% against my written recommendation. Item 2, 2 months ago, he ordered the removal of the load testing phase. Item 3, 1 month ago, he deleted the risk entry regarding the GatePay transaction limit from the investor deck." I paused to let the words sink in. Item 4, the automated email from GatePay warning us that exceeding 3.4 million users without an audit would result in immediate suspension. I forwarded this to the executive team. It was ignored. Camden looked up. His eyes rimmed with red. "We didn't know it would happen so fast." He muttered, "It was a projection. You can't blame me for being successful." I looked at him. This was not a surprise. "Camden, this was a schedule. It was a mathematical certainty. You built a car, removed the brakes, drove it toward a wall at 100 miles an hour, and now you are acting shocked that there was a collision." Evelyn tapped the table. "Let us discuss the signature," she said. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Ava Klein from Internal Audit joined the call via video link on the main screen. Her image was crisp. "Report," Evelyn commanded. "I have reviewed the access logs for the document labeled Executive Ownership Attestation." Ava said, "The digital signature belonging to Zara Cruz was generated at 10:14 this morning. The geolocation data confirms the signature originated from a device hardwired to the network port in the office of the Vice President of Product Strategy." Ava paused. "Furthermore, the keystroke analysis shows the password was entered using an administrative override key assigned to the CEO office." Randall closed his eyes. He looked like a man who had just been stabbed in the gut by his own child. "Camden," Randall whispered, "did you do this?" Camden slammed his hand on the table. "She wouldn't sign it," he shouted. His voice cracked. "She was being obstructionist. I needed that document to clear the legal hold with GatePay. I did it to save the launch. I did it for the company Anton Briggs." The lawyer finally spoke. He did not look at Camden. He looked at his notepad. "Forgery of a compliance document is a felony," Anton said. "Submitting that forged document to a federally regulated financial institution is wire fraud. Under the terms of your employment contract, this constitutes termination for cause." Camden laughed nervously. "Termination? Come on, Anton. I am the founder's son. You are not going to fire me. We just pay a fine. Dad, tell them. We pay the fine, and we move on." Randall did not answer. He looked at Marissa. "What is the damage?" Marissa Randall asked. Marissa stopped typing. She took off her glasses. "GatePay has seized our merchant account," she said. They are holding $12 million in processed funds pending a fraud investigation. Our retail partners are canceling their contracts. We have 50,000 refund requests in the last 3 hours. The stock is down 20% in after-hours trading. She looked at Camden. But that is just the operational loss. The real problem is the insurance. Camden frowned. What insurance? The cyber liability policy, Marissa said. The one that protects us from data breaches and platform failures. It has a payout limit of $50 million. We are going to need every penny of that to cover the class action lawsuits that are already being filed. So Camden said, that is why we have insurance. Claim it. We cannot. I said, everyone looked at me. I turned to page 2 of the document I had brought. Clause Section 8, Paragraph 4 of the Lloyds of London policy. I read, the policy is void if any key control owner knowingly falsifies security attestations. I looked at Camden. Because you forged my signature on the risk acceptance form. You proved that the company knowingly lied about its security posture. You committed fraud to get the launch approved. That act voids our insurance policy. The room went dead silent. Randall turned to Anton. Is that true? Anton nodded slowly. Yes. If we file a claim, the insurance investigators will find the forgery. They will deny coverage. We are on the hook for everything. The refunds, the lawsuits, the regulatory fines, all of it comes out of the company cash reserves. Randall looked at his son. The realization washed over him. Camden had not just crashed the app, he had stripped the company of its financial shield. He had exposed the entire organization to bankruptcy because he couldn't handle being told no. Camden, Randall said. His voice was barely a whisper. You destroyed us. Camden stood up. Dad, stop. We can fix this. We just need to spin it. Sit down, Randall roared. It was the first time I had ever heard him raise his voice at his son. Camden collapsed back into his chair, stunned. Evelyn Hart leaned forward. I am calling for a vote, she said. I move that Camden Voss be immediately relieved of all duties, his access revoked, and that he be placed on unpaid administrative leave pending a formal external investigation into corporate fraud. I second the motion. A board member on the speakerphone said. Randall looked at his son. He looked at the company he had built for 30 years. He looked at the wreckage. He took a deep breath. I vote yes, Randall said. Camden stared at his father. Dad. Get out, Randall said. Give your badge to Anton. Get out of my building. Camden stood up. He looked around the room, waiting for someone to save him. No one moved. He pulled his badge off his lanyard and threw it on the table. It slid across the wood and stopped in front of me. He walked to the door. He paused, his hand on the handle, looking back at me with pure hatred. I hope you are happy. Zara, he spat. You got your way. I did not blink. I did not get my way. Camden, I just did my job. He slammed the door behind him. The silence returned. But it was a lighter silence now. The cancer had been cut out. Now we just had to survive the surgery. Randall put his head in his hands. How do we turn the lights back on? He asked into his palms. Evelyn turned to me. Zara, she said, the board is transferring interim authority for platform reliability to you. You report directly to the risk committee, not to the CEO, not to product, to us. What do you need to get PulseDrop back online? I looked at the people who had ignored me for months. I had the leverage now, and I was going to use it. I have 3 conditions, I said. Name them, Randall said, without looking up. 1, I said. The budget for my department is restored to 100%, plus a 20% emergency variance for the next fiscal year. I need to hire contractors to clean up the data corruption. Done, Marissa said. 2, I continued. I have absolute veto power over any future product release. If I say it is not ready, it does not ship. No overrides, no CEO exceptions. Randall nodded. Agreed. And 3, I said, I want a formal public retraction of Camden's email calling my team legacy blockers. I want a statement sent to the entire company acknowledging that the failure was a result of bypassing safety protocols. Anton winced. That opens us up to liability. Zara, it closes the culture gap, I countered. The engineers need to know that speed does not trump safety anymore. If you want them to fix this mess, you need to earn back their respect. Evelyn nodded. Do it. Draft the statement. Anton. I stood up. Then we have a deal. I said, I will call GatePay legal. I will show them the logs proving the fraud was isolated to a rogue executive. I will get them to unlock the gateway. We will implement a queue system and bring the site back up in phases. It will take 48 hours. I gathered my papers. Thank you, Randall said. He sounded exhausted. I walked to the door. Zara, Randall called out. I turned. He looked at me with sad, tired eyes. You knew, he said. You knew exactly when it would break. You knew exactly how. Why didn't you stop him, really stop him? You could have pulled the plug earlier. I looked at the man who had let his son run wild because he was too afraid to be a father. I looked at the empty chair where Camden had sat. I spoke clearly, so there would be no confusion in the minutes of the meeting. You cut my budget in half. Randall, you took away my tools. You took away my authority. You told me to sit in the corner and be quiet. I opened the door. I did not stop him because you made it impossible for me to stop him. So I did the only thing left. I let the consequences run in full. I walked out of the boardroom and down the long, quiet hallway. I took the elevator to the lobby. The party decorations were still there, sagging and deflated. The confetti was scattered on the floor like snow. I walked out into the cool night air. I took a deep breath. The system was down. The stock was tanking. The CEO was broken. But for the first time in a long time, everything was working exactly as it should. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to hear where you are tuning in from, so please leave a comment below and share your thoughts. If you enjoyed this takedown, make sure to subscribe to Boss Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story get heard by more people.